You're probably thinking, what the hell is he doing? Like, is he really doing a list of his favorite albums of 2019 in April 2020? And yes, that's actually what I'm doing, absolutely. Hello guys, thank you so much for clicking on this video. My name is Kian and welcome, or maybe welcome back to my YouTube channel. I know it has been more than a few months since I recorded my last video, since I posted it on this channel, but you know, I could talk about my life for hours, but I don't think it's really interesting. And yeah, just a lot has happened in these past few months, obviously. I mean, when we look at the situation we're in right now, a lot has happened, but for me personally as well. So I'm sorry I haven't been able to record a video. Also, I haven't really felt like doing so. And yeah, just a lot of things. And I may suck to have a YouTube channel and be like, yeah, I just didn't want to make a video for the past 3 months, but that's what happened, and I'm really doing this because I want to have fun. I want this to be a healthy thing. I want this to be just spontaneous, me making videos because I want to talk about music and I want to share things with other people. So yeah, I don't want anything to be forced, so clearly this is not going to be forced since we're in April and I still haven't done my list of my favorite albums of 2019. But since in my last video I said that I really wanted to do that, I'm gonna do that. The truth about this list is that I already recorded a video of where I talked about my favorite albums of 2019 back in December, but it was really messy and I wasn't happy at all with it. It was also very long, like it was 3 hours long, so I had way too much to say. So I've decided to keep things short for this one. On my previous video I picked 25 albums that I ranked in my favorite, like I had the top 25 pretty much. And I thought, okay, it doesn't really reflect all of the albums that I've loved this year, so I've decided to pick 50 albums now. So yeah, you're thinking, oh, he wants to keep things short, he picked 50 albums. But what I'm gonna do, I'm not gonna like say a lot of things about each album. I'm just gonna say a few words to explain to you why I like this album and why I think you should listen to it. So yeah, I hope this is gonna be a nice formula. I hope you will enjoy it. I'm gonna do it in 2 parts, so this is part 1 with 25 albums. I hope you enjoy it, and make sure you leave in the comment section down below your favorite albums of 2019, because although I've listened to a lot of music, there are a lot of albums that I haven't listened to, so I'd love to hear more about them, and I'd love for you to suggest a few albums that I may have missed. I'm always looking for new music. Let's go! I've never been like a fan of BJ the Chicago Kid, like his previous album. I wasn't crazy about it, but this one really took me by surprise because I didn't expect much, and it ended up revealing itself to me to be one of the most fun album of 2019. Like, this is a great R&B record because BJ the Chicago Kid decided to work with a lot of different producers, so it really feels like it tries to pay tribute to different type of R&B. It also shows that it can do different type of R&B quite well, and I feel like he also questions himself on where R&B is going to go next, and it's just a very good album in this regard, and it's fun to listen to. Like, that's the best turn-up music you could ever imagine, and there are some really nice moments on this one. So even if it's not like the best R&B album of all time, or maybe not the most inventive as well, it's still a lot of fun to listen to. This album is pretty much like the debut of the next big rap superstar from the UK. It might not be the most interesting album of the year, but especially for British rap, because there have been so many incredible records from British rappers this year that are on this list. But I think AJ Tracey does a very great job with his first album to introduce himself to the world and to show that, yeah, he is going to be big, because all of the songs on this album are hit records. They could do so well for him, and there are a lot of different influences, so that's nice. It shows that he has a real versatility and that he doesn't want to do just hip-hop music. He's really versatile. He wants to try different things, and that's just really cool to listen to. And it's promising actually. He is a very promising artist, and it's a fun album to listen to. This album actually kind of took a bit of time to grow on me, but once I was in, like, you can't get out of this album. It's an album that I was still listening to yesterday, that I was listening to 2 weeks ago. It's, yeah, it just creeps up on you all the time because it's such an emotional album. It's such a beautiful one. It's actually one of the most breaking album I've heard last year. And I mean, it was a year where we've had a lot of breakup album, but this one is really special. And it's really dark actually, but it's beautiful. It's just really beautiful. There's a song on this album called Tonight. If you get to listen to the album, you should. This one is just, it's very original because it doesn't sound like anything else. The way Angel Olsen sings on that track is weird. Like, it's really unsettling, but at the same time, it's so beautiful. And it just makes you feel so many things. So honestly, listen to this album. It's incredible. That's just such a weird album, but I love it. I've never really been a huge fan of JPEGMAFIA before that album, but this one was just original. At the same time, it's you still want to listen to it. Like, it's weird, but you still want to listen to it all the time. So yeah, he clearly did something right here. I love Blood Orange. He's one of my favorite artists. I mean, Devonta Hines, the person behind Blood Orange, and this one was a nice surprise. Like, it was a little mixtape that he released less than a year after his previous album, and it might not be like his most interesting project or his best one or anything, but it's guest heavy. Like, there are so many great artists on this one, and they all add some things to the music, so it's just, first off, really nice to listen to for that, because it's surprising because there are so many great artists on it. But also, it's always nice to hear something new from Blood Orange, and I feel like this one, he really did a mixtape. There's really a mixtape feel about it, and yeah, he nailed it. So what else to say? There's been a lot of conversation around this album because Kevin Abstract has said a thing about it, and personally I've been kind of disappointed by what he had to say about this album, but in the end I just thought, I remember reacting to this album, and I remember what this album meant to me at the time, and yeah, I think it's really relatable for a lot of people. It's a brave album, as much sonically than in the lyrical content, and yeah, I think just for that alone, it needs to be respected as one of the best albums of 2019, even though there has been conversation about it, but honestly, just thinking about it, thinking about Mississippi, thinking about Peach, Joyride, so many of these songs on this album, it's a great album. So yeah, I've decided not to do like a top for this list, but this one was my #1 album of 2019 ever since it was released in January, and it always remained that one. And I was kind of surprised because I like James Blake, but I was never crazy about his music. Like, I was crazy about this album, and this one, first off, the production is incredible, of course, but just what James Blake did here, he told a story about falling in love and all of the states of mind you go through when you fall in love. You know, the pleasure of meeting someone that you really connect with, but also the doubts and the fear of yourself, and sort of accepting yourself also, and being like, yeah, I can love myself, I can love someone else. And yeah, it kind of sounds cheesy now said like this, but that's just so powerful on the album, and yeah, it's beautiful. So go listen to that one. It was my favorite album of 2019 for sure. A very interesting album. She's a violinist at first, and there's such you can tell that she's an academic musician when you listen to this album, that she's got academic training, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like you're listening to an album that is overproduced, which I really, really appreciate, because the production is really sort of the main appeal of this album. It really is, but it's stunning. But at the same time, it just, once again, it's a fun album to listen to, and the production is a delight. So honestly, it's also very original. I cannot think of an artist who makes music like Sudan Archives, so I think you'd really like it. At first you think, oh, this is like, it's gonna be like one of these experimental albums. It really, really isn't. It's actually, you have a lot of elements from R&B or hip-hop that make it a bit more accessible, and that's actually really nice, so go listen to that one as well. Blood is another one of my really favorite album of 2019, and I knew that since I've heard Duets for the first time outside of the album when it was just a single, because it was just so special, this song, really. And I think Kelsey Lu is a really special artist. It's funny because Sudan Archives that I just talked about is a violinist, and Kelsey Lu is actually at first a cellist, I think you say that like that. So she's an academic trained musician, but it really doesn't feel like it. Like, of course, the composition in this album is stunning, the melodies as well, but there's just something very spontaneous about this album and something really organic about it as well, and it keeps on surprising you actually. At the beginning you think, oh, I'm listening to a folk album, okay, but then you have Duets that is absolutely stunning, a very huge piece, and then you have a song like Foreign Car, which is a bit more hip-hop influenced, I think, and then you have Poor Fake, which is more of a disco influenced track. Then you have a cover of I'm Not In Love, and yeah, this album just keeps on surprising you and surprising you again and again, so yeah, that's a great surprise. I've actually reacted to this album and my mind didn't really change about it. I still think it's great and it's just so much fun. It makes you want to dance all the time. It's a masterclass in producing and collaborating. It's very impressive, but at the same time it feels like a boiler room, like a DJ set, and you just want to dance. So you're not thinking too much about how great the production is. Of course you do think a bit about it, but it's mostly a lot of fun, and all of the collaborations are so great. And KAYTRANADA is definitely a god of dance music and R&B music, and that's really all I need to say about it. If you had told me that Charli XCX would one day end up in my list of my favorite albums of the year, I would have been really surprised, because I've never connected with the music. I've never did. Even mixtapes, Pop 2, that everyone else has one of the best pop albums of the decade, it never worked with me, like it never clicked. And funny enough, this one did. I feel like because it really mixed an experimental side, a robotic PC music kind of experimental side, with also a more mainstream sound. You know, there are great melodies on this album that really make you want to listen to those songs again and again. And there's also some kind of vulnerability on this album, and that I really appreciated. I felt like for the first time ever I listened to an album by Charli XCX, The Human, even though a lot of the music felt superhuman a bit. It definitely felt very vulnerable, and it felt like an actually really personal album. So this was a really, really nice surprise, and February 2017 is incredible. My only regret about this album is that it wasn't released early in the summer, because it definitely feels like a summer album. It's an album that you want to listen to while driving around, while you go to the beach and you're just reflecting on your life and everything. It's nostalgic, it's really beautiful. I get that they released that like in late August, because it does have that late summer kind of vibe when you get nostalgic and you think about the summer and you're like, okay, well, this was fun, but it's over. So it works actually very well, but yeah, it's just an album that I'm gonna want to listen to this summer because it's perfect for that. And yeah, it just takes you to a place where you're at the same time nostalgic and it makes you feel good. And yeah, the only thing also, although I love Sir and I think people don't talk enough about him, is that maybe he let his collaborators kind of take the spotlight from time to time on this album. But at the same time, his collaborators are great, so it's still a very nice album. Although we've been waiting for Dear Tommy for like 5 years now, 6 years, since 2014 I think, Chromatics actually surprised us last fall by releasing this album called Closer to Grey, and it sounds like the soundtrack from Italian horror film from the 70s or the 80s, something by Dario Argento. It's actually stunning. It's really stunning. It's slow paced though, so I get that people might not really get into it, but there are some really nice club anthem in it that feel just so weird because, as I've said, it really sounds like the soundtrack of a horror film. So there's something a bit unsettling about them, a bit dark, a bit hypnotic as well, and I think that's actually the quality of this album. But yeah, it just takes you on a journey really, and there are so many dreamy tracks, like Moving Mountain is beautiful. The cover of Sound of Silence by Simon and Garfunkel, they're so great at covering classics. So yeah, once again, it's a stunning album by Chromatics, and I think it's actually my favorite album by them because it's one of the most cohesive. It doesn't feel too long like some of the album did. So yeah, a very, very nice surprise. I know that for a lot of people, Blank Face is like a great album. It's the best thing that ScHoolboy Q could ever make. So of course they were a bit disappointed by Crush Talk. Actually, Blank Face, I've never really been crazy about this album. I think it's good, but nothing more. So I was actually really happy about Crush Talk because I felt like it was ScHoolboy Q sort of trying something new while still remaining very faithful to his sound. I thought it was a much more reflective album than the previous ones. He talked a lot about his life as part of a gang, as drug dealer, but with a very he knows that it is the past, so it really reflects on it. And he also talks a lot about his new career as a rap artist and also as a father now, because it does talk a lot about this on the album. So yeah, it's a surprisingly reflective album, and even though in the sound it doesn't really feel like the reflective work of a rapper, it still remains really faithful to his sound, and it's actually really nice. It tries new things with his sound, for example on a song like Drunk, also Lies, which isn't necessarily the best song on the album, but it definitely has like a 90s G-Funk sort of influence to it. So it adds something new to the album, and that's what I really appreciate. I feel like it tried to do something new, and to me it succeeded, so it was really nice. It was one of my favorite hip-hop albums of the year, to be honest, so yeah. A nice little surprise that was initially released as an EP and then she released a deluxe version, but it's a nice R&B album by someone who I'm sure we'll hear a lot about in the next couple of years. There are a lot of great producers on it, such as Bad Bad Not Good or KAYTRANADA, and when I say KAYTRANADA, you know that we're gonna expect some nice dance R&B vibes, and that's what this album is giving us. It's just really, really cool to listen to. It feels good. Her voice is extremely warm. It's really playful as well, this album. And there's a song called Voodoo that I absolutely love on Dangerous. So yeah, definitely. If you like R&B, this one you're really gonna like, I think. GoldLink released that very interesting project called Diaspora this year, and I don't really know how to describe it, but to me it feels like GoldLink was trying to pay tribute to the diversity of black music all around the world. So it's a very eclectic album, and at the same time it feels very cohesive, and you can feel that all of the different genres and different influence that GoldLink touches on this album, it does it in a way that is very authentic and with a lot of passion and a lot of respect for the music, and that's just so nice. And it's also an album that is so much fun to listen to. There are so many bangers on that album, so many songs that you keep going back to because they give you that rush, you know, they really give you that rush of good music. So definitely a surprising album from someone like GoldLink, who once again now just tried something new and really succeeded at that. Another band that I didn't think would end up in my list of the best albums of 2019, and yet here they are. And ever since I've heard Harmonio, I knew that this new album by Vampire Weekend was going to be special, and it absolutely is. It's to me the best album ever, hands down. It's the most ambitious, it's the most interesting, it's also the most experimental. They managed to make a 20-track long album that still feel cohesive, that doesn't feel long at all, while still trying a lot of different things on each song. There are songs that are a bit more conventional pop that are really delightful to listen to. I was talking in my review of it about stadium anthems, and I really think like songs like Harmonio or This Life are stadium anthems, more pop, conventional pop songs. And at the same time, they also managed to create really experimental songs that makes you think, what the hell did I just listen to? But at the same time, you keep listening to those songs because they're fascinating to listen to. And I think that album is really fascinating to listen to, and it's one of the best pop albums of 2019. Definitely. You know what? I don't think that there's a lot of things to say about this album except that it is so romantic. And it's nice to hear an album about falling in love, but the good side of falling in love. Like, all of the things on this album are really positive, and even though if on the second part of the album, Shura is a bit more reflecting on her life and especially on death, because she talks a lot about death on this album, especially on a song called Tommy, on a song called Flying, on Princess Leia. It's still so full of light that, I don't know, it's just beautiful. It's easy to listen to. It's a nice piece of comfort to me. So yeah, a beautiful album that I didn't expect to be this good. I wasn't expecting Brockhampton to release an album so soon after Kevin Abstract's solo project, and I also didn't expect Brockhampton to release an album that was even better than what Kevin Abstract released earlier this year. Ginger, to me, might be my favorite album by Brockhampton. I don't know. It's good. I loved the previous album, Iridescence, and I love the Saturation trilogy. I love that Iridescence was them going experimental and succeeding in that. And even when they didn't succeed as well as they thought they did, it was still an interesting album. I feel like Ginger is a bit more conventional, but there's also a lot more hurt in it, and that's what I like when Brockhampton get a bit emo and in their feelings. So that was another nice surprise. I really didn't expect to like this album as much as I did. British rappers have been doing nothing but excellent work this year, and this is a perfect example of that. Little Simz did an album that has such musicality to it, and it's really nice. She recorded it with a live band. It definitely makes a difference. The musicality of this project is so good, and it's one of the main appeal of this album. It's so nice to listen to. Really, it's fascinating orchestration, composition, and but at the same time, it's not just the only main appeal of this album. The other main appeal is Little Simz, who just is as unapologetic as ever on this album, and her lyricism is stunning. And honestly, I don't have much more to say about this album because it's really a stunning album. Early Than Past Life isn't an album that I've written to as much as I thought I would, but it has been on heavy rotation for a big part of last year, and it's a nice pop album. I feel like Maggie Rogers can do more than this. I definitely do think that she has the potential to do things that are even more original, and that on the next album, hopefully she will really find a sound. But this was still a very nice debut album and a good pop album overall. What a better way to end 2019, which was a huge year for British rap, than with probably the most important artist in British rap at the moment, honestly. And Heavy is the Head is a magnum opus. Like, it's the previous album, Against Signs and Prayers, was great, but Heavy is the Head is something even greater than this. It's Stormzy really affirming himself as the most important artist in UK rap, for sure, but at the same time it still remains very human, and it still shows a lot of vulnerability on this album. And yeah, it's so nice to have someone who is really down to earth, and you can feel that in his music. And he also tries to be a bit more pop at times, which doesn't always work, but it's still really nice of him to try. And yeah, it's I love this album. Like, I didn't think I would love it as much as I do. Once again, I say that, but I really, really love this album, and there are a lot of songs on this album that are definitely yeah. I mean, I'm rambling, but I really do love this album. That's what you need to know. This album is like a trip. It's so weird once again, but what I like with Sandy LXG is how he mixes elements that are really experimental, really weird, we can say weird I think, with things that are a bit more traditional, like folk music, and I love that mix between the two because it creates a dreamlike atmosphere on an album that still feels like something very familiar to you. And so the heart of the album is still there, the emotion works, you really connect with the songs, even though sometimes they're almost like, sometimes it almost feels like noise, but it isn't, and you really know that, and you still keep returning to this album. I personally did return to this album a lot, and I really love it. And I didn't know about Sandy LXG before this one, and honestly, what an introduction, really. I think I've said it all in my reaction video to this album. I fucking love Bon Iver, like, I really, really love Bon Iver. And this album, I'm so glad that it came out in the beginning of August, because it was supposed to come out like on the 30th of August or something like that. And like, this album, we needed it last summer. We needed it because, and we need it right now too, because this album is Bon Iver at the most political, but at the same time it's not a political album at all. Like, Justin Vernon just looks at the world around him, and it's his reflection. It's really, this album is a man looking at the world around him, and I think it's the best way to reflect on the current situations that are happening in the world, especially right now. So yeah, it feels very emotional, because you definitely can relate to the album, while other albums that are really political and that artists really want to be political, you cannot relate to it that much. But this one, you can really relate to it, and it's at the same time kind of sad, but it's also really comforting to think that, yeah, you're not alone in this. I saw a lot of people saying that Banks on this album sort of repeated herself, and that she struggles to evolve as an artist. And even though I do agree that certain songs sounded like things that Banks already did earlier in her career, first off, I think those songs, yeah, Banks already did those songs in her career, but she did them well, and she does them well again today. But I also think even though I don't think it's as great as The Altar, for example, but I still think she did try new things for the first time in a long time, especially her work with Buddy Ross on songs such as Sozo and What About Love, and one of my favorite, Hawaiian Mazes. I feel like she really tried something else, a more organic kind of R&B, a bit 90s influence, but still very dreamy and very psychedelic. And yeah, all of these songs where she tried new things, I really love them. They're really original, and it's interesting to see that Banks there's a lot of light in this album. I do say that sometimes there's a lot of light in a song or in an album. I don't know if it really makes sense to anybody, but to me it makes a lot of sense. And it's nice for once to hear Banks on something like this. To hear Banks be a bit sad, of course, but at the same time look at life and love in also a more hopeful way. Alright guys, that's it for the first part of my favorite albums of 2019. I hope you've enjoyed it so far, and I'm gonna post the next one soon, I promise. Thank you again for watching this video, guys. I'm waiting for you to give me your feedbacks on these albums and on your suggestions as well, your favorite albums of 2019. I'll see you next time, and in the meantime, take care.